I moved into my sister's apartment after my breakup. My ex cheated, and I couldn't stay in that apartment filled with her perfume and lies. My sister, Lena, took me in without asking too many questions. She had always been the cool one, bold, witty, a little wild. Living with her was easy in some ways and strange in others. The place was small. I slept on the pull-out in the living room, and we shared a bathroom. Not ideal, but it worked. Lena had this way of making everything casual, even when it wasn't. She'd walk around in her robe, tease me about my dating life, or lack thereof. One evening, I was fixing the shelf in her room, the screw was stripped, and I was trying to get it flush with the wall. She leaned on the doorframe and said with a smirk, "Need help using your tool? Or is that something you usually handle solo?" I laughed, but it caught me off guard. I tried to focus on the drill. She stayed there, watching me too long, not saying much. That was the first time I felt something off, not wrong exactly, just strange. The next morning, she was back to normal, tossing me a mug of coffee, complaining about work. I brushed off the moment. People joke, weirdly sometimes. But she kept dropping little comments. Like when I came out of the shower and she said, "Damn, someone's been doing crunches. Too bad you're my brother, right?" I didn't know how to respond. There's a fine line between a joke and a dare, and she danced on it constantly. Still, I told myself it was harmless. That's how Lena was, flirty with everyone. She even once joked she'd marry herself if she could. One night, we were both lying on her bed, scrolling through our phones while a show played in the background. Her room was warmer than the rest of the apartment, so sometimes I'd hang out there when it got cold. She nudged me and said, "Remember when we used to build forts out of couch cushions? You always had to be the one holding the flashlight." "Yeah," I said, "you always wanted to be in charge." "Still do," she said, without looking at me. She stretched, and her leg brushed mine. I didn't move. Neither did she. A few minutes passed, and she said, "You ever think people make rules just to make life harder? Like, what if we only followed the ones that mattered?" I didn't reply. I didn't trust my voice. I just watched the light from the screen flicker across her face. She didn't look confused or nervous. She looked certain. Then she said softly, "If you ever want to show me your tool, I won't tell anyone." I forced a laugh, stood up, and said I was tired. But my hands shook as I brushed my teeth. I kept telling myself it was a joke. It had to be. But I didn't sleep much that night. After that night, things didn't go back to normal. Lena acted like nothing had happened, but there was something different in how she looked at me. Longer stares, slower smiles. I started catching her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. She'd stand close when we talked, her hand brushing mine like it meant nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. I told myself I was imagining it, but I knew I wasn't. She started calling me pretty boy, said I had sad eyes girls would line up for. I tried to laugh it off, but she knew exactly what she was doing. She'd lean in, whisper something just on the edge of wrong, and leave me sitting there, confused and warm in the face. One afternoon, I was fixing a drawer in the kitchen. She walked in behind me, leaned on the counter, and asked, "Is that the same tool you used on my shelf?" I said yeah, and she smiled too wide.
Shame.
"I thought maybe you had a special one for certain jobs." I looked at her, tried to see if she was serious. She just raised her eyebrows like it was a challenge. I started thinking about her at night. I hated it, but I couldn't stop. There was no reason I should feel this way. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. She'd always been the one to pick me up when I was down, and lately, she was the only person who made me feel seen. That kind of closeness can mess with your head. She knocked on the bathroom door one night while I was shaving and asked if she could come in to do her makeup. We'd done that before, nothing weird. But this time, she stood behind me, looking into the mirror over my shoulder, commenting on my jawline, how sharp it looked. Her fingers touched my neck to wipe away a bit of shaving cream. I froze. She didn't pull away immediately. Later, we sat in her room watching some romantic movie. She poured us wine, curled her legs under her, and joked about how the couple on screen had no chemistry. "It's all fake," she said. They never show what people really need, just the pretty parts. I asked her what she thought people really needed. She didn't answer right away, just looked at me and said, "Sometimes, comfort matters more than rules." She reached over and touched my hand. Not playful this time. Her fingers stayed there, lightly pressing, warm. I didn't move. I didn't speak. My heart was thudding like I'd run a mile. She said, "You're allowed to need someone, even if it doesn't make sense." I didn't lean in. I didn't pull away. I just let her hand rest on mine while the room got quieter, heavier. The air between us had changed. We both knew it, even if no one said a word. The next morning felt wrong from the second I opened my eyes. I could still feel the weight of her hand on mine, still hear her voice saying things that didn't sound like jokes anymore. Lena was already in the kitchen making coffee, like it was any other day. She handed me a cup and smiled, but her eyes didn't hold mine for more than a second. We didn't mention anything. Not the movie. Not the wine. Not the silence that said more than either of us wanted to admit. I couldn't stop thinking. What were we doing? What line had we crossed? Or were we still tiptoeing on the edge? It haunted me. I wanted to pretend it hadn't happened, but I couldn't erase the feeling. The way my heart had raced, how it hadn't felt wrong in the moment, just real. I avoided her for most of the day. Took my laptop to a cafe, sat there trying to work, but my mind wouldn't cooperate. I kept thinking about what I would say if anyone found out. I imagined my best friend's face if I told him the truth. I imagined telling my mom. The shame hit like a truck, but right behind it was something worse, a twisted kind of excitement. The feeling that I had shared something with someone who actually understood me in a way nobody else had. When I got back, Lena was on the couch, legs tucked under her, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and said, "You disappeared today." I shrugged and mumbled something about needing fresh air. She didn't push, just nodded and said, "You hungry?" Like she had noticed the tension pulsing between us like a live wire. That night, I heard her walking around her room, pacing. Then silence. A few minutes later, a knock on my door. She opened it before I said anything. Stood there in her usual calm, no-nonsense way. Then she asked, "You freaking out?" I couldn't lie. I nodded. She sat on the edge of the bed and said, "We didn't do anything wrong." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that everything about it felt wrong. But then she added, "We're just two people who needed something. That's not a crime." I looked at her, trying to find a trace of regret in her face, but all I saw was exhaustion. She looked tired, not just from the day, but from everything. I knew that look because I saw it in the mirror every morning. The weight of loneliness, of being misunderstood, of craving connections so badly that lines started to blur. She stood and said, "I'm not trying to mess with your head. I'm just trying to survive this life the best way I can." Then she left. No drama. No questions. I lay there for hours after, asking myself the one thing I didn't want to admit. If it felt like comfort, if it felt like honesty, does that still make it wrong? The next morning was unbearable. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, replaying everything in my head, trying to imagine a way to erase it. There wasn't one. I heard my brother leave before sunrise, quietly, like he couldn't stand to be in the same space. He didn't even knock on my door. He just left. My stepbrother avoided me too. The energy had shifted completely. Whatever existed between us the night before had evaporated, leaving only silence and tension thick enough to choke on. By noon, I got the call I'd been dreading. My spouse's voice was calm, but different. Measured. They asked, "Is there something you want to tell me?" I felt my stomach drop. I asked why. They said my brother had called. He didn't give details, just told them they needed to talk to me. Urgently. That was all it took. My spouse came home early, and the moment they saw me, it was over. They knew. I didn't deny it. I couldn't. I just stood there, eyes down, waiting for the fallout to hit. And it did, just not in the way I expected. There wasn't screaming. No rage. Just silence. A quiet that felt like a wall slamming down between us. They asked me how long it had been going on. I told them it wasn't an affair. It happened once. I tried to explain, to give context, but the words sounded pathetic. I could see the pain in their eyes, not just from what I did, but from the betrayal coming from two people they trusted. They left that night, took a bag, and didn't say where they were going. I didn't hear from them for 3 days. My stepbrother packed and left the next morning. No goodbye. Just a note on the counter. Sorry. That was all. My brother blocked me. I tried texting, calling, even emailing once. Nothing. The damage was complete, immediate, and impossible to undo. I sat alone in that house for the next week, surrounded by reminders of everything I'd just destroyed. The framed photos on the wall, the pair of slippers at the door, the empty coffee mug by the sink. Everything suddenly felt like evidence, not of a crime, but of a life I didn't deserve anymore. Eventually, my spouse called. They didn't want to talk about fixing anything. Just logistics, bank accounts, the lease, who would take what. They didn't yell or blame. That hurt more than if they had. It meant they were already done, that there was no fight left in them. And I couldn't blame them. Now, weeks later, I still wake up expecting a knock at the door. Some part of me thinks maybe my brother will show up, ready to talk. Or that my spouse will come back, even just to scream at me. But they don't. No one does. That's the part no one warns you about. Not the guilt. Not the shame. The silence. The way it stretches out, day after day, reminding you that when trust is broken, sometimes it doesn't get rebuilt. Sometimes you just live with the ruins.